What's going on, guys? Isaiah here from Goo Gaming, and today I have PJ and Logan here with me, and we're going to be going over what we believe to be the meta tier list for the upcoming Power of the Elements format with Spright and tier elements. Now, this may not be how the format evolves out, but this is what we think is going to be going into it. So let's jump into the video. Alright, guys, so starting off the tier list strong, we're going to hit it with ABC, which deck's not been too bad. It's been doing pretty good. It had a couple tops in Nationals, but I think with the new decks, it's just going to slowly decrease down, which is what most decks are going to do. I don't think this deck's going to be able to keep up with tier elements and Spright.
Yeah, the deck's not good if you don't see the field spells, and even then it's like one Dark Ruler away from just being horrible.
I think people just need to put it to bed. It's past time, dude.
Yeah, the Therion stuff is really good, and like the deck runs well with the Therion stuff, but like Logan said, if you don't have your field spells, your deck's just really lackluster.
Yeah, and that's kind of too slow nowadays, YuGiOh. Like, require a field spell to play.
What about Striker? Obviously, we got second place finish in Nats, but how does it keep up with
Tier
Spright
0.
and... so? Tier 0? Striker, Raise Bay?
In my heart, she is always tier 0. But in this format, she's probably tier 1.5. Because she probably has an okay Spright matchup, but I'd imagine that the tier elements matchup is it may not be that bad with Shark Cannons.
Yeah, you have like Shark Cannon and stuff to stop the dudes in grave. You have the anchor to stop your guy that the kid guy that's ritual summon first.
Yeah, the deck is probably actually pretty good. It's probably tier 1.5 though, just because of the nature of the deck being weaker. Whenever it gets the new spell, it'll probably go up to probably tier 1, but until then.
Well, Striker, you can always build your deck around the format too. So like I feel like unless they
traps as well.
Yeah, I feel like if they don't like just get rid of cards like Raid, then this deck will always just be in the top 3 tiers of deck.
Another thing to mention is Mystic Mind's probably going to get banned, which this deck loses a lot from that. So
yeah.
Yep.
But if it doesn't, then go Striker.
What about Drytron?
I think Libromancer is just better. Like, it's better
I
deck.
don't think I think that after playing Libromancer and Nats, but I think that Drytron's problem is that it loses to all the same things that the other combo decks lose to, and they have no way to prevent Dark Ruler no more or Droplet. There's nothing they do about it. Like if you have those cards, you just break their board.
Yeah, it does the same thing as the combo deck.
I mean, they can play the trap card, the Magic Key trap card to stop.
Yeah, that's
Dark
true.
Ruler and stuff.
But I don't know. I just feel like you're just playing a worse deck than the other decks.
It does the same thing as all the combo decks, but it's
traps.
easier to get around.
Yeah, like the deck's probably still going to be pretty decent, just because the nature of Drytron going first. If they go uninterrupted, and you don't have a way to break their board, it's just game. But I don't know, especially with I think DD Crow coming back into the format and those type of cards, Drytron gets really hurt by those cards. So
now Dotscaper is for the Mathmech Cyverse deck.
Yes, I think the deck's going to be tier 2. I think the deck's okay. The one thing, like the upside of playing like the generic Cyberse cards compared to playing like pure Mathmechs is you can play adventure cards in your deck, which is pretty good. It helps you play through hand traps, etc. The deck can play through Dark Ruler No More and Droplet pretty easily and play a ton of hand traps, but the only issue of the deck is you're playing one of those decks that just like you need to draw both halves of your deck. You need to draw the hand traps going second as well as the starters to be able, or your deck's just not strong enough.
You can
but he's
also OTK too, really easily.
Yeah.
That is true. And stuff.
But
Heat Soul is really
one good
like
card. Yeah, like drawing 2 is crazy. So I like the deck a lot though.
Now a lot of people like Eldritch for the trap cards, but I feel like you were saying earlier that tier elements probably just shaft this deck. Just so much power.
Yeah, I think that people get in their heads that Halcaro is enough. Like, do you really want to play 3 Halcaro? Probably not, right? And you have 2 in a game. They fusion summon 3 times on the first turn of the game. You're not gonna be like your Conquistador literally gives them effects if you pop their cards.
Yeah.
And like you literally have no the field spell's just gonna pop all your floodgates, and you're just eventually gonna get outgrinded. I do not think it's a very good deck moving into the format. I don't think it's as bad as like. I mean, floodgates. I think it has a pretty good Spright matchup, but like I think the tier elements matchup is just not good at all.
We're also getting the new generic trap as well, which isn't like awful. It's like a crackdown, uh, plus something I forgot.
Divine Wrath Crackdown, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't know if you'll play it in this deck. But yeah, I think Eldritch is just like it's fine. It can win some games like with your floodgates, but like you have a deck coming into the metagame that just it's kind of like how Despia has a really good uh Eldritch matchup, but like this deck just has a better Eldritch matchup than Despia does. So
Right.
Well, speaking of that, how do you feel about Despia this format? Do you think it's going to stay as like a top contender deck? Or do you think it's just going to plummet?
I definitely think it's gonna be worse than tier elements. There might be a hybrid people play. Do not like particularly like that version of the deck, just because I feel like since tier elements don't lock you, like you can do a lot with the deck, and like
If we do or go crazy.
yeah, and like you can make Dark and Access Code and Abyss Dweller and all these different types of cards. And if you're filling your deck with Brand Diffusion and stuff, sure you can make a Mirror Jade, but like all these extra bodies that you're accumulating onto the field from your tier elements effects, actually you're just not getting any value from. So I don't like that a whole lot. But as in pure Despia, I think the deck's a little worse. I don't think it's going to be in tier 1 anymore. Um, but if they don't hit anything, I could definitely still see people playing it and still doing well with it just because of how powerful Brain Infusion is.
Right.
Now, speaking of the boss we're talking about, tier elements, which I think a lot of people are overlooking this because Spright did so well in the OCG, but I personally feel like this is the deck to play.
Deck's insane, bro.
If
And
you
it just
look
gets
at the
better.
OCG, if you look at the OCG towards the end of Spright format, right before the Shizu stuff come out and Toe got banned, tier elements in like places other than Japan were as played as Spright because people just solved the deck. It just took a little bit longer because the cards are just so unique and the deck doesn't really build itself. Um, and I agree with that. I think tier elements of their cards, pound for pound, are more powerful than Spright. I think Spright is a very good deck, and I think they're both probably on even playing field. I think they're both just as good as each other, and I think both decks are insanely powerful, and they're the two decks to beat going into the new format for sure.
Turn 1 win is crazy.
All right, what about Flunder? I think this deck counters both decks pretty good. I feel like it's better than these decks.
I agree. D-Shifter is very good against both of the new decks. As well as obviously it's good against a lot of the rogue decks and barrier statue. A lot of the decks just don't have an out for.
Yep, I think if for some reason I think with Mystic Mind staying in the format, and if they don't hit barrier statue, if they even think about hitting barrier statue, I think this will be a tier 1 deck for sure. How do you guys feel about Exosister?
D-Shifter.
It plays D-Shifter, yeah. I think the deck's a little bit weaker than Spright and Tier Elements, just from consistency wise, not like what the deck can do. It's just you're playing trap cards in your deck, and also like some of the Exosister monsters are just natural bricks. But like if you're not playing against a deck that involves the graveyard, I think the deck's really strong because it has like a 1.5 card combo basically that ends on 4 banishes, and the deck can play around Dark Ruler and Droplet really well.
That's important.
I think the deck's tier 1, but I don't think the deck is like. I could definitely see the deck going lower than Flunder because I think Flunderies might just be a little bit better just because like
It's
their
like
ceiling is
consistent.
just higher. I
And
wouldn't even say their
Exosister
ceiling
struggles
is
against
higher.
Flunder too.
Well, I was thinking more of like their ending board is a lot better than Exosisters, but Exosister can play through every hand trap except Nibiru a lot better than Flunder can. So it's 50-50. I think they're very similar decks though.
An Old Faithful Tri Brigade.
I think the deck is not that bad because of the Spright build of the deck. I tried it a few games. You can do a lot with the Spright cards, and because most of your Tri Brigades are level 2, so you can turbo those guys out. That's really cool. The only issue is your ending
You get
board's kind of
locked.
subpar. And the deck's really like you can lock you like have two different ways like three different ways to lock yourself, and if you're not careful, that deck just could give you fucking game losses at a big event just for fucking minors and warnings and
Yeah.
stuff.
Yep.
I feel like a lot of people might try to cheat with this deck, so I'll be on the lookout for that. But I think the deck's pretty good overall though, like tier 1.5, but I would not put it past that, just simply because like the ending boards just aren't strong enough.
Element Grade, I feel like is just it's just going to be kind of like a worse Unleashed deck because you're just going to play a bunch of floodgates in it, but you have the power to kill faster. I guess I don't know. I don't like this deck. I don't think this deck does anything.
I mean, Magnus says just a better salad, right?
Yeah.
Like,
You can play the new Math Mech cards in this deck though.
you also play Heat Soul.
Yeah. So there is a argument of like why Salad might move up a little bit, but I think the deck is just a little bit too slow.
Yep, I agree. Now Ignister or the Jelly Beans. Jelly Beans, you
Yeah,
can
the
play the new
beans.
Math Mech cards, and that I think is going to make the deck pretty good.
I think the deck is tier 1.
Yeah.
Because okay, so a lot of people are probably, I think Ignister was like very underrepresented last format just because like people, I don't know if just people don't like how they look. I don't know.
Scared to play it, something.
Scared to play it. I don't know, but like the deck is really
Diabetic.
good. And I think like with the new Mathmech cards, the deck just gets like another dimension.
Adds another
And
layer, yeah.
it also has like a very good matchup. I wouldn't say a very good matchup. A pretty good matchup against both Tier Elements and Spright, because neither one of those decks have a clean way out the big guy. Like Spright only has one out, and Tier Elements, if they don't build their deck correctly, have 0 outs. And you can, and the new Mathmech card by itself is a one card link like 4 or 5. So you can make the big guy just off of the Mathmech card alone. So if they hand trap that, you just go into your Ignister plays and make him anyways. It's really
Yeah,
cool.
like you can play through like one low impact and one high impact hand trap pretty easily with a deck. And plus you get the broken trap card from Mathmech to use as well.
Yeah.
Plus it
And
just,
another thing
it just forces interruption.
is if people were playing a lot of Dark Ruler and drop it like I expect at the beginning of the format, this deck literally doesn't care about either one of those cards. You can do that. They
Yeah.
don't care. It doesn't out a rival, so they just take advantage of your poor deck building and you just lose.
Jelly Bean.
That big jammer's crazy.
The old Elijah Special Marine Cess. How do you guys feel about this into this format?
Not enough power.
Think so? Better than
Yeah, I
Salad,
mean,
but
like
not
the
too
deck.
much.
Well, like I think it just like their cards don't really line up as well as they probably should. Um, against some of these newer decks, like especially tier elements. Because like hand traps overall aren't the best against that deck, just because the deck can play through multiple. Like you need like specific hand traps, like DD Crow or Skullmeister or something. Like
Plus
Ash
you
is
can just
pretty
use
good,
your
but
field
like
spell to pop their field spell, so.
yes, I don't think the deck's gonna be that great.
About Live Twin. This deck hasn't been part of the format really at all much, but you think people are going to play Spright with this like they did in the OCG?
I mean, they're trying like now, but I just feel like there's better engines of playing Spright other than Live Twin.
Yeah, I think the deck is just not great, but I haven't tested the deck, so I may be completely wrong. But it just seems like it's kind of like how the Tri Brigade deck is just trying to make a cute version of Spright when you could just be playing Spright.
Yeah.
Just trying to do too much of the deck that's already good.
Yes.
And
What about
ends
Fenno
up
Knights?
just making it worse.
Yeah, exactly. What about Fenno Knights?
I don't think Phantom Knights are awful, especially if they don't ban Scythe. Because Phantom Knights historically can play around Droplet and Dark Ruler no more like nothing.
Yeah.
But that being said, the deck didn't really gain anything from this new set.
And it still loses to all the same hand traps all the other deck loses to as well.
Yeah. So I'd say it's probably tier 2.
Now, Predaplant, I would assume this is just going to be the Predaplant branded version, which is probably the same level field or maybe lower than the regular branded Despia deck.
I've seen a few people played with Tear Element, but I don't know.
I think
I
it
feel
might be
about it.
pretty good because Instant Fusion's insane in tier elements, so this deck
Yeah.
can just tutor up Instant Fusion and it's nothing. The only issue with that is you're making your tier element deck that's normally very good against hand traps really like you're like putting things that can stop or like that are weak to hand traps in your tier element deck.
Yeah,
That's what I was
just
trying
make
to say.
weaker
So
hand traps.
Making your
that's
deck
one
more
thing I don't
fragile.
like about it.
Trap card is pretty good at the prayer planning, especially shoot with like 2 Dregs Peleos pretty much already.
I mean, that trap card is insane against Spright because you can just put a counter on all their guys and they all become
Yeah.
level 1 and
Yep.
there's like they can't really do anything with them.
That's what I was thinking the deck was going to be pretty good with, because you can just literally lock Spright out of playing the game, but I think it does just make it too fragile to be like a very high contender. Now we got Plunder. Now Plunder always seems to sneak out tops, and I really think, I think the deck is okay, but I really think it's mainly just it plays against people that don't know how to play the deck.
Yes, I
Like,
agree.
Huge surprise factor.
I think it takes advantage of people's ignorance, and that being said, like that's a huge edge in a tournament.
Yes.
The only problem is I think that the power shift is getting a little bit more like further away from Plunder Patrol, and the deck may be a little bit too slow now. But who knows? I haven't actually tried this deck against any of the new decks. But I would imagine that it's just not strong enough.
Yeah, I agree. It'll probably still get its tops here and there, but I really think it's just going to be a surprise factor deck. Now, the Punk decks, I think, are still going to be pretty strong, but I think they're just getting power crept out already with the tier elements and Spright.
I mean, people are playing Punk Sprite decks. They're like testing it out to make like cash roll or play like Baron and stuff like that. But I don't even know if like it's like the same thing with like Charm Brigade plus EO 20 is like a little bit better. But, like your deck's already like good. I don't see need.
I think the Punk decks are still like they're gonna still be tier 1 decks until a ban list comes through to correct like the things that it missed before. But if Scythe gets banned, or Halp gets banned, these decks are like damn near unplayable.
Yep.
Yeah.
Maybe not Scythe. Maybe like there's combos that like, I don't know about that's really good. But definitely if Halp gets banned, I don't really see a reason to be playing that. But until a ban list, I think the decks should still be pretty good.
Yeah. You'll still run into a couple of them in the tournament. More than a couple of them. I say the same thing with the Red Rose deck. It's probably the same concept. Like until Halp or Scythe gets banned, it'll probably still be a tier 1 deck, but it's just not on the same power as the new decks that are coming out.
Yep, I agree.
Now, how do we feel about Sharks? And is this with the new Goaty cards that we're getting?
Yeah, you could probably put them together. I think the Goaty cards are really, or gaudy. I think it's gaudy. I think that those cards are actually really good, but I don't know if there's enough of them to make a cohesive strategy yet or not.
I've seen a lot of people say that it could either be like the UA deck or it could be like BA if they just add the right cards with the right support. Kind of has like a TCG exclusive archetype.
Yeah, I like Sharks. I wish the deck was better, but the new Goaty cards, I'm calling them Goaty because they're going to be the GOAT, I wish was a little better. I hope they end up being a meta deck because that'd be really fun to play. But I would say they're probably tier 2. Now, Mathmech's get new cards. How do you guys feel about those?
Good.
I love the new Mathmech cards. I think they're in between tier 1.5 and tier 2 with the regular Cyburst deck. I think Ignister is just a better version of these decks. Until someone proves me wrong. But the new Mathmech card is extremely powerful. Like, did so much for the deck.
All right, now this is what everyone's hyped about. Spright. Obviously, this deck's gonna be really good. I think people are overshadowing it and think that it's gonna be like some tier 0 deck that's gonna be unstoppable. I don't think that's true here, but it's definitely gonna be one of, if not the best deck.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
deck's
It's
crazy.
sure gonna be up there. Like it adds its own like follow up with like Toad and all that. You can splash other engines. You just have like your Nibiru proof plus Gamma proof if you resolve your Exceed. Plus you have Starter and Smashers, which if they don't get rid of Mystic Mind, then you have a in-engine out to it. So plus you have an in-engine out the window besides like droplets, imperm, etc.
Yeah, I think another power of Spright is the deck can play through multiple hand traps without adding extra engines into their deck. Their engine, their basic combo that you're going to go for, naturally plays through hand traps. So the rank 2 locks them out of being able to Nibiru and Gamma. And then, they have red, which can negate monster effects. And they also have carrot that can negate the Imperm or whatever, right? So, like, if you summon these monsters, you can naturally play through your opponent's hand traps. And if your opponent's playing, like, I think the decks that are a little bit more fair actually have a harder time against decks like this because they don't have to splash Brave into play through hand traps. They can just naturally play through it and just play their deck and play their game plan, and it happens to go, like, play around hand traps, which is really strong.
Yeah, I think the deck is definitely going to be a nuisance, but I just don't personally think it's going to be as terrifying as everyone's worried about. Now, Sword Soul has started falling off a little bit, but obviously just won Nationals. But how does it compete with Spright and Tier Element?
I think the Spright matchup isn't that bad, simply because like being able to deal with the bodies is really strong, and Sword Soul can make the new level 10 Long Young Synchro, and it can also set Blackout with the Chi Negate, and that's a lot of the time would most likely be enough to stop Spright. And another thing I really like about
board.
Right. And another thing I like is Vishuda lines up very well against both decks. Because if you summon Vishuda, they have to Toad negate it, right? Or if you summon Vishuda against tier elements, there's not much they can do to be able to stop you from bouncing one of their guys. Sure, they get a pop with, if you bounce a tier element, they get a pop with their field spell. But like if you shuffle like it into the extra deck or whatever, if you put it into the extra deck, or if like you back the other guys. But the point is, you can do plays like Sword Soul can break boards as long as they don't get floodgated really well. And if you build your deck like that, and neither one of these decks currently really try to floodgate you out except with Window, but your deck can naturally out Window with the Vishuda and stuff. But that being said, I think it's still tier 1. I definitely think that like it's lower on the tier 1 spectrum.
It's tier 1 because tennies, in my opinion, but it's barely there.
Yes.
Alright, so Therion, this is the Therion Punk deck. I think this deck was really overhyped, and it didn't really do as well as everyone thought it was going to do, and I feel like it just does even worse this format.
Therions are big and clunky.
Yep.
And that's the problem with the deck. Like, you're choosing not to play Brave cards because you want to play these Therion cards that accomplish almost the same thing as Brave cards, but are just harder to summon.
And heart attack.
Yeah, they have a good grind. Like, Therion cards are good. It's just their issue is they're like big monsters are just bricks. That's just how YuGiOh works usually.
Yeah.
I think the deck can still Calamity, which is really strong. But this deck is really bad to Dark Relay No More and Droplet. And I think those are going to be the ideal cards week 1. So I don't like this deck at all.
Last but not least, we have Dragon Link, which I think this deck is very strong. I think Borland is insane. I think this deck was really good last format, but people just didn't play it properly. But I don't know how they work against Spright and Tier Element.
Winda, go Burr.
Yeah, that's fair.
That's all I can. Like, I don't know how it lines up against Spright. I'm sure it's like fine against Spright, but against tier elements, I would imagine you just can't beat a Winda. And your board's not super oppressive. Like if you can get hand trapped.
I'm pretty sure Smasher's just outs this, correct? Outs the Borland guy, because Smasher's he's on destroy, it banishes.
Yeah, as long you can't target it, right? There's only
With
monster effects.
monster effects you can't target.
Yeah, then yeah, Smashers is just a 1 card out to that.
So it gets
Yeah.
even worse.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
I mean,
just-
I think it's still tier 1.5. Like, I don't think it's worse than Marin says. There's no way.
Yeah, no.
There's no way. But it is a little bit worse. But like
Since
the
the
deck's still
decks have
strong, and if you're
In engines.
the good thing about Dragon Link is if you're really good with Dragon Link, it's kind of like Sword Soul. If you're really good with those decks, you can still perform well even if the deck's not that good. Just because like the better when you master a deck like those two, like it really
The
like
ceiling
brings it
gets higher,
higher,
bro. Yeah.
like way higher. So just because like if you're really good with Dragon Link and you think, oh, I'm not gonna be able to play Dragon Link because of tier element or whatever, don't listen to all that. Still play your Dragon Link deck. Try it
Yep.
out. Because like when you master a deck and you get really good with the deck becomes higher than what we have on the tier list. Like a really good striker
Yes.
player.
I was about to say
like
Ryan, you
Striker's
for
tier
example.
1 or whatever. Yeah, like it's just we're talking about like the average. Like if two like identical players played each other and they both knew the same amount of stuff, what decks would be better?
All right, guys, and that is what we think the meta tier list is going into this format is going to be. Obviously, it's probably going to change a little bit. There's probably going to be some decks rise and some decks fall off. Spright format, tier element format is going to be kind of crazy. It's going to be cool to see which one of those decks actually do come out on top of the format. I have my vote on tier elements. Let me know what your vote is below. If there's a deck that we didn't cover that you think should be on here, let me know. But that's going to be it for today's video, guys, and we'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.